Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk Today. We got a special episode. It's going to be a live episode of Dad Talk Today in studio, and I got somebody here that I respect so much, guys, and I can't wait for you to hear a little bit about what he does and some of the resources that are out there for you guys. But I'd like to welcome to the studio Professor William Bernet. William, how you doing?
Nice to see you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So you have been on the forefront of this thing for a long time when talking about parental alienation. I know we've had you on before, and the last time I saw you, it was actually at the studio up in Atlanta recording a TV episode. But for our viewers, we've had a lot of people that have followed the page since then that might not know who you are. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, I'll give you a little bit of history. So I'm a psychiatrist, and in particular, I'm a child psychiatrist. And as time went on, I got more and more interested in legal issues. So I really focused on child forensic psychiatry. So that's things having to do with court, child psychiatry having to do with court. And so that covers things like injuries. You know, I suppose a child is injured in a car wreck or something, that they might have a psychiatric issue, or child abuse, child maltreatment, sexual abuse, and divorce and custody. So I ended up focusing more and more on divorce and custody and children of divorced parents. And so that's how I learned about parental alienation, 20, 25 years ago. And then, in about 15 years ago, that they started talking about the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that is put out by the American Psychiatric Association. And they were going to put out a new issue, a new edition, which came out ultimately in 2013. And so my colleagues and I wondered whether we should try to get parental alienation in that book, in the DSM. And so that's how we came together. And we wrote a book called Parental Alienation, DSM-5, and ICD-11. See, DSM is put out in the United States. ICD is put out by the World Health Organization.
Yeah. For anybody that might not be familiar with that, exactly what is the DSM-5?
So it's the list of diagnoses. The psychiatrists have several hundred psychiatric diagnoses, and the book lists them all. Right. You know, depression, schizophrenia, child abuse,
right,
whatever might happen, anxiety problems. And so my friends and I thought that parental alienation should be included in that. And so we wrote our own book about the evidence, all the different reasons why that should happen. And so that's how we came together. In other words, I'm kind of giving you the history of my organization, Parental Alienation Study Group, Pasg.
Yeah.
Because we were the people who got together to write this book. There were about 60 of us who all contributed. And when the book was over, we thought, why don't we have a way to stay in touch? And so we formed this organization as a way for there's 60, 65 of us. How were we going to stay in touch? And then once the organization got off the ground, it became bigger, and we, got a website, and we got official government approval, to be a nonprofit organization. And then more and more people, some people from friends of friends find out about Pasg, or some people find us on the website. If you Google parental alienation, you probably would come up with this organization.
Yeah, guys, for anybody that doesn't know about this, the Parental Alienation Study Group is a great resource, pasg.info, where you can go and see what's going on there. I know it's growing. I know you said it started out with like 60 to 65. How many people are involved with the PASG now?
Every year, well, we keep track of this, of course, like everybody keeps track of their numbers, but we're up to about 900.
Wow.
And so they're not simply people who visit the website. I'm sure we have more than, the 900 are people who actually have signed up. We have a directory, we have a little information about each person. So Some of these people, a lot of them are mental health people, social workers or psychologists. Some of them are attorneys or judges, a few judges. Excuse me. And about half of them are parents. We're about half legal and mental health professionals and about half parents, alienated parents or grandparents. So I think it's really interesting to share information and to have a way. We have a forum, which is the kind of thing where you can, if you're a member, you can write in and put in something. This is our website, and I can show you a couple of things here. Look under books. See, down here at the bottom are books written by members. We have 900 members, so lots of us have now written books. And in fact, here, let's look at mine. Go down to the L's, because Lorandos was the first author. Well, actually, here, see where it says Children, Parental Alienation?
Yep.
See, that was the book that started this all. And then if you highlight on it, it'll take you to to Amazon where you can purchase the book. But we can go back to the list. But that was the book that got us together, the 60 of us. And each one has a little description of what it's about. And so most of these have to do with children or divorce, but not all of them. I mean, some of our authors have written about. Now, here's a book by Amy Baker. This is also a pretty famous book called Children of Parental Alienation Syndrome, that she studied adults who had been alienated as children. And this became a pretty famous book about parental alienation syndrome.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is one part of the website. You can go back to the home page, and I'll show you a little bit about what else we have here. If you look under resources, we have all these categories.
Wow.
And let me just talk here a little bit about let's go to videos. We there are lots of people. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if this is working, but if you go down to the bottom, it works.
YouTube channel?
No, Law Center.
Okay.
These are little things that one of our members does. He makes these little animated videos. Let's just go to one of them. I think they're all the same.
Parental alienation and domestic violence. What gets lost in the fog? Since the term parental alienation
might not
appeared,
be able to
countless
hear
articles
this,
have
but if you
described
go
the
to that
phenomenon
link-
of battered.
Oh, that is neat.
He's done. His name is Larry DeMarco. So he's done about 30 of these little, very, very short. Each one is only a few minutes, and some of them are animated. Go further in this one.
Alienated children express their feelings through
this
artwork.
Is cool. This is
When
pretty
children
cool.
are young, they have
If you can't
difficulty
hear this,
expressing
it's
complicated
okay.
emotions
I've done this.
because they're limited by
I've gotten
language and
interested in
maturity.
artwork.
However, we can better understand the experiences of children when we listen to them through their drawings and artwork. Children expressing themselves through their art appears in books published 40 to 50 years ago.
No, the sound isn't going.
Children Draw and Tell was written in
Yes, they
1982,
can hear us.
and it
So,
gives samples of children
just take a look
expressing
at
their
some of these
places in the
pictures.
family through pictures. This picture is entitled "You're My Hero, Dad," and it was drawn by Sean, age 8, who was doing well in school and identifies with his father. Hugs and kisses of body parts, for example.
I'm sorry to say, are really
Children
sad.
exhibit loyalty conflict, found by taking sides with one parent
This is a little
and rejecting a
animation.
The same 9-year-old girl, I hate my female parent.
I hate my female parent.
Moderate level of parental alienation. This is a linoleum block print by a 9-year-old girl before she became alienated. She drew.
See, this is a nice little picture that this child did for her mother. And then what happens though?
The sun and a flower.
And then as time goes on,
The same girl, age 11, has now become moderately alienated. She was studying Picasso in art class, and she drew a picture with displaying internal conflict.
Now,
A 13-year-old boy and his moderate or severe alienation. He studied art outside of school, and he drew a raging fire in a forest. Severe level of parental alienation. In cases of severe parental alienation, the child is closely attached to one parent and refuses to visit with or even talk to the rejected parent. In these cases, the child perceives the favored parent as totally good and totally perfect, and the rejected parent evil and dangerous. The child rejects the second parent without any legitimate reason. In this picture, a child draws a picture of himself and his own parents living in a storm. His mother appears to be alienated from his half-brother and sister by their real dad. An 8-year-old girl, before alienation, to mom, love. The same girl before the alienation, I love you, mom. Now the same girl, age 11, experiencing severe alienation. Go away. You don't belong in this world or house. No one has loved you. No one ever will or has loved you.
Isn't that sad that a girl who a few months ago seemed normal now has this really disturbing message?
And this is
severe.
Alienation.
This is the purpose of this is to show what's going on in the child's mind who has severe alienation. And let's look at one more example. I think it's coming.
A 9-year-old girl,
this
before
is really,
alienation.
Really sad, and I gotta warn you.
Dear Dad, there's only one person in the world to be my daddy,
So this is a normal
and that is, drum roll please,
one person in the
you.
world to be my daddy, and that is
Love you loads.
Okay?
XOXO
I gotta warn
from
you,
me.
this picture is pretty
The same girl, after the onset of alienation,
Here's the same little girl
draws a picture of beheading her father. Me, sword. You, head unattached. Here's a drawing by a 10-year-old girl before alienation, and she's
the website. But I just want to, I guess we got on that because this is one of the videos that's on the website, and you know there's many other ones. So I'll just tell people, if you're interested, if you happen to be interested in it or you want to join this organization, see where it says contact us. Just go there, and then there's a place that says contact, and you can put in your name and your email and put a message, and you can say that you saw this video that we're doing today and that you want more information about this organization. So anyway, the basic purpose of PASG is for us to stay in touch with each other. In other words, there's so many things happening in this world and in this space about alienation, and there's so many people have all sorts of different projects going on. And so this is a good way for people to stay in touch.
Stay connected.
And secondly, we try to be educational. In other words, we have really important educational material on the website that people can take advantage of. We put on conferences. We put on big conferences in Washington and Philadelphia and in Brussels, Belgium a few months ago. So we try to be educational. And it's a resource in terms of like therapists or attorneys if people need something in particular.
Yeah, so the process would be somebody would email you, and then you would get them signed up, and then they would get access to that, right?
Now, most of what we were just looking at is actually available to the general public.
General public.
We do have another part of the website for members that people can post things that are really not quite available. Well, for instance, you know, we publish articles, and you're not allowed, because of copyright issues, you're not always allowed to just post articles for the entire world, but you can post it for your members.
Right.
So articles and book chapters and things like that are on the members part of the website.
Getting back to what was going on in that video, that was something I definitely wanted to talk to you about today. And I know you touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about the different levels of alienation and how those play into this. I know, was it mild, moderate, and severe?
So when we put the book together, we wanted to have definitions that are usable and that the term is operational, I think the word, that you can put them into action. So these are this is pretty simple definitions: mild, moderate, severe. Mild, the child says, I don't want to go see the parent, like daddy.
Yeah.
I don't want to go see daddy, but the child goes, and once he's there, he's fine.
Okay.
He and daddy have a good relationship. Even though he's complained about it and he says, I never want to see daddy, when he goes, he's fine. That's mild. Moderate, the child says, I don't want to go see daddy. And he goes, and he's difficult. That there may be moments when he loosens up and they talk and they get along and they do something fun together. But most of the time, he's negative. The child is negative to that parent. He stays in his room, doesn't want to have dinner, doesn't want to go to a show or do anything. That's moderate. Severe is the child says, I don't want to go see daddy, and doesn't, and adamantly refuses or runs away, or if he does go, he's very negative during the entire visit. Like maybe he stays in his room, maybe he stays on his cell phone with his mother for the entire time. Maybe some of these children, the severe cases, they bring their own food because they say, oh, my daddy is trying to poison me, so I'm not going to have any meals with him. I'm going to bring my own food in my backpack. So that's severe.
So what would you say from what you've seen is the different percentages? Because I think I could be wrong, but I think you said at one point it was like there's actually 200,000 severely alienated parents. Did I?
Yes,
remember?
That sounds about right. We don't really know the exact numbers. Our general impression is that most cases are mild, and some cases are moderate, and a few cases are severe. But that number sounds about right because the research that I did, these are estimates. We estimated that about 1% of children have some degree of alienation, and 1% of 74 million children.
Oh, wow.
Is that's how many children in the United States is 700,000 children have some degree, and most of them, only a small number of them are severe, and so that makes sense. So maybe about 200,000 might have severe alienation.
When talking about
these are really ballpark figures.
It's
an estimate.
Yeah, and when talking about the DSM and the ICD-11, I know there's been people that said that, well, there's something in there, that's similar to alienation, but what's that been like trying to get parental alienation into the DSM?
Well, there are terms that can be used.
Yeah.
And let me tell you one. It's an interesting name, but this is an actual diagnosis in the DSM. Listen to this. Child affected by parental relationship distress. In other words, parental relationship distress is conflict between the parents and the child is affected by it. Well, that's a paraphrase. I mean, that the word parental alienation isn't there, but that's a paraphrase of what happens in parental alienation. And another one is called parent-child relational problem, and that's a paraphrase. And there's one more, child psychological abuse. So if a clinician, if a psychologist has a case, and it's a case of alienations, you can use one of those terms. You're doing a report,
right?
You put a diagnosis at the end of it. You can describe it as alienation, but you can use one of those actual diagnoses in your report. We'd like to get the actual words in because we think it is a mental disorder. I mean, these children, like I just showed you some pictures drawn by children. These children are disturbed. If they're contemplating in their mind, daddy might get killed by me, that's a very disturbing thought for a child to have. So that's why we think it's a mental disorder. And it needs to be recognized. And if it were recognized, then it would be taught. For instance, in graduate schools and psychologists and social workers, if it were in the book, the DSM, it would be taught more likely.
You know, and your experience with this, do you see that narcissism is usually attached to this with parental alienation, or are you seeing some of the cases where I guess maybe you're taking two parents that at one point in time experienced conflict in their marriage, now they're in high conflict, they go to the courts, and that is just creating that competition, and it kind of plays into that?
All those things happen. The problem of court in the United States is that aggravates everybody's position. And if the children are caught in the middle before court, they're caught in the middle even more after court.
Right.
So that is that, you know, I can't change the court system, but many people want to do that, and that needs to happen. But you mentioned people being narcissistic. I mean, that seems to be what happens in with the alienating parent. In other words, narcissistic means that parent feels that they know everything about how to raise their child.
Yeah.
They're the best parent, and the other parent is inadequate. And so people who are very narcissistic have this egotistical view of themselves. And so that happens sometimes in narcissistic, in alienating parents.
Well, that's why I was asking, you know, it almost feels like the family courts sometimes promote that because it's about who's the better parent and how much trash you can, you know, throw towards the other person. But, you know, tell everybody a little bit more about some of the other things that you're doing, Dr. Bernet, when it comes to the Pasg. I know you guys do a lot of work with that. And is there anything that we should be looking forward to coming up?
Well, we're going to revisit the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And I mentioned my colleague, Dr. Amy Baker. So she and I are giving a presentation, excuse me, actually at the meeting of the American Psychiatric Association.
Okay.
In May coming up. And that's never happened before. She and I are giving a presentation about why parental alienation should be in the DSM. And this is at the meeting of the actual APA, which is the organization that publishes the DSM. So we hope to get people come to that. It's in New Orleans in May. We hope that people, by people, I mean members, you know, people who are at the convention will come. And so we continue with that. That's a big project. We also continue with research. You know, there needs to be ways to do testing. You know, testing on the mother, the dad, the child, that helps to show alienation is occurring in this family. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's ever going to be a definitive test. That's all you need, because any of these tests have to be part of a bigger evaluation. You know, the psychologist meets with the mom, meets with the dad, meets with the children, but the test can be helpful. And I think there needs to be more research on that. And there's another interesting thing that we're concerned about, which is that there's a lot of things written about alienation which is mistaken, which is what we would call misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation published. And so we're trying to track that down. We're trying to publish corrections. We've published articles in which we identify the misinformation. And in some cases, we try to get, if it's a book, we try to get the book corrected. Or if it's an article, we try to get the article corrected. Or we try to publish another article, which is counters the first one. So we've done all of those. And that is unfortunate that this is such an important topic. It's unfortunately that there's so much bad information that's written about it.
How much misinformation are you seeing out there?
Well, I recently finished a project, and I'll explain it to you. But let me explain first, how do you diagnose parental alienation?
Yeah.
Is you have to be able to show that there's a parent, one of the parents is engaging in alienating behaviors. And secondly, the child actually has the symptoms that occur in alienation. For instance, the child says, I don't want to go see mommy or daddy.
Yeah.
And then the child has some of these other symptoms that typically occur. For this is an example, the child might say, one parent A is the good, totally good parent. Parent B is bad parent. So anyway, the diagnosis, you have to have these signs in the child and the refusal, but you also have to show actual alienating behaviors by the favored parent. You have to have both of those things. So some people say that we don't do it that way. Some people accuse us that any child who doesn't want to go see the other parent, the reason is alienation. We don't say that. In fact, I don't think anybody says that. Anybody would say that if a child doesn't want to go see one of the parents, you got to figure out why.
Right.
There are a number of different reasons. He might have an anxiety problem. Maybe he had a bad experience with that parent.
Right.
Maybe that parent's not a very good parent. In other words, when the child manifests contact refusal, there are a number of different reasons why that might happen. We all say that. But we get accused. There are people who write articles who say that the parental alienation people don't take that step. They say that any kid who refuses, we diagnose parental alienation. That is a misstatement. It's a false statement. It misrepresents what we do. It makes us look stupid,
Right.
because nobody says that. So that's misinformation.
Yep.
And that's been published over and over and over again. In fact, I can even tell you the first instance we found was in 1994.
Yeah.
There was an article in a law journal that said that, and then many other journals have copied that. It's just horrible that it's happened over and over again, because this creates a real confusion about what alienation actually is. We would never say that every child who refuses contact does it because of alienation.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's gone on for years, and it's a really serious problem that's happened.
That is interesting. Not long ago, I made a post. I took a lot of heat for it. Talking about like the word narcissism and how that's become like a buzzword. Everybody's using it, and you see couples that break up, they're both calling each other narcissists. The alienation word, I've been hearing from a lot of the family court professionals, they're not taking it as serious anymore, because they're saying, oh, that's just a way of a parent trying to get the upper hand because it's so commonly used.
Yeah, that has become a problem, and that happens a lot, I think, with psychiatric diagnoses. That first of all, nobody knows about it, and then it gets written about and it gets identified, and then it starts to get overused.
Yep.
And so we all have to be careful about that. We should really save alienation for the cases that we have both symptoms in the child and also clear-cut, repetitive, alienating behaviors by the parent.
And that's not saying you want to silence anybody, by no means, but it's stuff like this, and you've had this misinformation like you're talking about out there for years. We're having a hard time proving it as is. So, I think we just got to be a little careful about
Sure.
that. Yeah. And I wanted to talk to you about that. Let's talk about false allegations. How often do you see false allegations tied in with the parental alienation and the alienating parent?
Well, it happens in both directions. That if a parent A wants to make parent B look really bad, that they accuse them of things, and so it's very common. It doesn't happen in every single alienation case, but it's quite common for parent A to say that parent B was abusive, or injured the child, or drove intoxicated with the child in the car, or sexually abused the child. It's very common for that to happen. And so the people who investigate have to really investigate, is this did this really happen or not? Or sometimes it starts with something that happens that's really trivial. Dads and kids sometimes horse around, and they horseplay, and that might get a little rough. I mean, the kid sort of pushes the dad, and the dad sort of pushes the kid a little bit, and it's fun. I mean, it's really, I mean, especially boys, of course, enjoy this, and it's fun, and it's kind of bonding between the dad and the kid to kind of engage in this sort of wrestling. It's sort of like pretend wrestling,
Right.
And occasionally, sometimes the child might get hurt. The boy might get hurt a little bit, or he might get a scrape somewhere. And if the mother wants to find faults, she'll say that the dad injured the child on purpose and that it was a form of child abuse. So that's a lot of times things that are really trivial get somehow made into something worse. I'll give you an example that happened to me a long, long time ago. Is the child comes in, he comes back from seeing dad for the weekend, and he has a little cut on his ear that actually was a cut that bled at some point. But now it's it's healing up. And so the mom goes after this, and she says, "What happened to you? Let's get this straight. What did daddy do to you? How did daddy injure you?"
Yep.
And she was getting ready to report it to Child Protection Services. But you know where that came from? The kid got a haircut. The dad took the kid to get a haircut, and the barber nicked him slightly, and that's what it was. But if you want to look for things and you want to be suspicious, you look for this stuff, and then you make a big deal, even though there's nothing there.
Yeah, I definitely think family court's got a lot to do with that, because again, it's not about going in there and telling how good of a parent each one is, but finding the faults, and that's how they get the upper hand. But talking about false allegations, we're also starting to see these cases like we was talking about before we went on, and John Mast and several of these other parents that are starting to get killed. Talk about just how dangerous parental alienation can actually get.
Well, I mean, these things don't happen very often, but sometimes they're really, really tragic outcomes in alienation families in every direction. I think the most common is that targeted parents get very, very discouraged and suicidal. In other words, if you're targeted, if you've been rejected by your child, and you've lived with this, and you've gone to court, and it's just extremely frustrating. And so occasionally both dads and moms commit suicide.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking. Occasionally the child commits suicide. There are some known cases, famous case in Canada. The parent wrote a book about it, about her son who killed himself, who had been alienated from the mother. And the child was stuck. The child was stuck living with the dad, and it was just an impossible situation, and he killed himself. So occasionally children do. Occasionally a homicide occurs. Okay. And what might happen is the alienating parent wants to keep the child away from the victim parent. And so the alienating parent will kill the child and said, "I'm not going to let the other parent have this child." Yeah. And then sometimes they kill themselves. So these are all horrible, horrible things that happen, and they don't happen a lot, but they occasionally happen in alienation cases.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Bernet, I want to be mindful of your time, and I thank you so much for coming down here. Guys, make sure to get out there and support the Parental Alienation Study Group, pasg.info. but you've written several books. You know, tell everybody where they can keep up with you and some of the things that they should look for.
Well, the most recent book is called Parental Alienation, Science and Law, because Dr. Lorandos and I did this together, and I focused on the science part, on the research and the clinical way, how do you diagnose alienation clinically? And Dr. Lorandos focused on the legal part, about how do you win a case in court or so on. So that came out a couple of years ago, and it's available at Amazon. If you go to Amazon and put my name in and Parental Alienation, you come up with that book.
Yeah, guys, please go and check that out. But thank you so much for joining us again.
It's great to see you.
It was good to see you again. All right, guys. Thank y'all. I hope you have a good weekend.